There was a time when our Neanderthal ancestors sat around the fire and knew every nuance of the pain that crossed their bodies. The cutting cold of winter was not just low temperature. It was a severe teacher who whispered about survival lessons, about the precious fragility of existence. They did not have painkillers to silence the echo of a fractured bone, nor antidepressants to dampen suffering. The pain was his most reliable compass, always pointing to the naked truth of the human condition. Today, we walk the streets of our cities like well-dressed ghosts, carrying smartphones that connect us to everything except ourselves. We have developed a medicine of oblivion so refined that we can anesthetize not only physical wounds, but the whole emotional landscape that defines us as conscious beings. We created a world where it felt became inconvenient, where sensitivity became synonymous with fragility, where crying in public is almost an act of insurrection against the established order. The silence that inhabits our modern hearts is not peace, it is paralysis. It is the silence of the wrong bird that unlearned to sing from the dammed river that lost its natural music. We call this maturity, emotional stability, personal growth. But deep down, in the deepest caves of our psyche, something screams desperately for recognition. This scream is not hysteria or imbalance. It is the last sign that there is still life pulsating under the protective layers we build. The sensitivity that we try so much to suppress is not a defect of the manufacture of the human soul. It is its most refined feature, its most accurate navigation instrument in the complex ocean of existence. When someone feels too much, when easily is thrilled, when he gets hurt with words that others consider harmless, we are not facing a weak person. We are facing someone whose emotional receptors still work, whose internal alert system has not been completely disabled by the cultural anesthetic of modernity. Our cave ancestors knew that pain had sacred function. She was not enemy to be defeated, but messenger to be heard. Each wound told a story. Every tear carried ancestral wisdom on the limits and possibilities of the human heart. They understood that a painless life would be like a compass, free existence, technically possible, but hopelessly lost. The fundamental problem of our age is not that we suffer too much, but we suffer badly. We lose the art of giving meaning to pain, of turning wounds into doors of understanding. We replace the painful wisdom with empty comfort, exchange the authenticity of feeling for the performance of constant happiness. And so, paradoxically, we multiply our suffering by denying it, intensify our pain by anesthetizing it. There is something deeply subversive in a person who still feels authentically in a world that requires emotional numbness. Its sensitivity is not an inappropriate symptom. It is resistance against the subtle dehumanization that surrounds us. Each genuine tear is a revolutionary act against the dictatorship of artificial well-being. Every moment of vulnerability is a statement of war against the tyranny of emotional productivity. If this message lit something inside you, don't let this fire go out. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share with those who also feel too much. Look at the crowds that move through corporate corridors, shopping malls, social networks. They see faces that radiate an artificial luminosity, smiles that act as logo of a carefully built personal brand. These are the performers of successful life, the main actors of a piece that never ends, where the break has been cancelled and the audience has disappeared, leaving only the perpetual representation of a happiness that no one else remembers how to conquer genuinely. The productive smile has become our most sophisticated mask. Unlike ancient theatrical masks, which at least admitted to being a device, it pays to the skin in such a way that we forget where the persona ends and where the person begins. It is the smile that automatically appears in working meetings, which is activated in front of cell phone cameras, which remains firm even when the chest is being torn inside. This smile does not reflect joy. It is a social shield, a password to access the functional club, the adapted of those who successfully tamed their wild impulses. Carl Jung warned about the dangers of the persona when it becomes more real than the authentic self. Aldous Huxley, in his prophetic visions, anticipated a society where happiness would be distributed in controlled doses, where emotional discomfort would be treated as a social disease. We no longer need the sum of admirable new world. We create our own behavioral narcotics, our own drugs of denial of internal reality. In modern corporations, a peculiar language has developed that reveals our emotional alienation. We say let's align expectations when we want to say I'm lost and confused. We talk about optimizing processes when what we need is to find meaning in what we do. We created well-being policies that act as aspirins for an existential migraine that no one has the courage to diagnose correctly. The paradox of modern functionality is that it requires from us a kind of voluntary emotional lobotomy. To be efficient, we need to turn off our internal alert systems. To be productive, we must ignore the signs of exhaustion that our body and soul send incessantly. In order to be accepted, we must present an edited version of ourselves, a version that never questions, never rebels, never feels more than the social protocol considers appropriate. Our Neanderthal ancestors lived in small groups where each member was known in their entirety. There was no way to hide sadness, anger, fear. Emotions were vital information for collective survival. A hunter who denied his anxiety could endanger the whole group. A mother who suppressed her intuition could lose a child. Emotional authenticity was not psychological luxury. It was a matter of life or death. Today we create environments where authenticity is seen as professional risk. We develop metrics to measure everything except what really matters. If we are living lives that make sense, if we are honoring our deepest nature, if we are being faithful to what is the most sacred in us, we transform human existence into an engineering problem, where feelings are bugs to be corrected and vulnerabilities are security failures to be eliminated. The cruel irony is that the more we try to make well-being, the more we move away from genuine contentment. The more sophisticated our emotional avoidance strategies, the more complex our suffering becomes. It is as if we are trying to cure thirst by drinking salt water. Each sip increases our need. Every dose of artificial anesthesia amplifies our hunger for authenticity. At the 10th floor of a corporate building, a woman locks in the bathroom and allows her face to finally reveal what she carried for 8 hours of productive meetings. His tears fall on the invisible keyboard of the soul, typing words that no reports will ever document. I can no longer pretend that everything is fine. In the next cubes, colleagues discuss metrics and deadlines, oblivious to the fact that there is a human being silently shattering a few meters away. This scene is repeated thousands of times a day in our civilization, the desperate scream of sensitivity being drowned out by the white noise of productivity. To be sensitive in the modern world is to carry a peculiar type of loneliness. It is to see colors where others see only gray. It is listening to melodies in conversations that sound monotonous to most, is to feel the pain of others as if it were proper and being called dramatic for that. The sensitive person develops a kind of emotional bilingualism, learns to translate his complex internal language into the simplified dialect that the world can understand and tolerate. In the time of the Neanderthals, the one who felt most intensely often was the tribe shaman, which could perceive signs invisible to others, which anticipated climate change by the restlessness of animals or anticipated conflicts for tension in the air. Its sensitivity was a collective resource, survival tool for the entire group. Today, this same capacity is seen as an individual defect, something to be medicated, therapeuticed, controlled. The last wild animal of the soul is precisely this ability to feel without filters, to receive the world in its gross intensity. While most people have developed emotional scales, defense systems that soften the impact of reality, some have kept the skin of the thin and permeable soul. These are those who cry with movies that others consider silly, those who get hurt with words that others call joke, those who perceive subtle cruelties that go unnoticed by the anesthetized multitude. Modern brutality no longer uses swords or cannons, uses indifference, sensitivity with negligence, the normalization of rudeness, with the elevation of emotional hardness to the status of virtue kills. We say swallow the cry for children who need to learn what to feel is human. We teach not too sensitive for teenagers who are discovering the complexity of their hearts. We award the coldness with promotions and punished empathy with labels of inadequacy professional. The internal conflict of the sensitive being is a constant civil war between authenticity and adaptation. On the one hand, the ancestral voice that whispers, "Feel everything, live intensely, do not waste the depth given you." On the other, the social choir that screams controls, normalize, weather like everyone else. This battle happens every day in each social interaction, in every decision about showing or hiding what really happens inside. Society has created an undiscovered manual on how acceptable human being. In this manual, tears should be private. Anger must be controlled. Joy must be moderate. Love must be strategic. Those who dare color out of the lines of this manual are rapidly labeled as unstable, immature, problematic. What we do not realize is that this manual was written by people who forgot how to feel really, who confused emotional control with maturity, who exchanged the richness of human experience for the security of emotional mediocrity. Our cave ancestors knew that intense fear before hunting could save lives, that deep sadness for loss teaches about the value of what we have, that anger can be transformative energy when well directed. They did not see emotions as problems to be solved, but as information to decode it. The person who felt most was not the weakest, often was the wisest, the one who could read between the ways of existence the messages that others lost in the rush of everyday life. The biggest lie that our age was able to sell to ourselves is the idea that we should always be fine. This lie is not disguised as obvious falsehood. It presents itself as wisdom, as evolution, as progress of humanity. We built a complex pain avoidance architecture that includes from meditation applications that promise instant peace to legal drugs that keep us in artificial contentment. Huxley was not writing science fiction. He was making an early diagnosis of the future we built. The cycle of modern dopamine is a prison disguised as an amusement park. We woke up looking for the first hit of pleasure on mobile, on social networks, in the notifications that confirm our digital existence. During the day, we feed this cycle with online shopping, foods that activate reward centers, entertainment that distract us from ourselves. At night, we resorted to series, alcohol, or any substance that allows us to temporarily turn off the internal reality that has become unbearable to face. Each moment of emotional discomfort is immediately interpreted as a problem to be solved, a symptom to be eliminated, failure in the system that needs to be corrected. We have developed total intolerance to emptiness, inner silence, boredom that could lead us to deep reflections. We transformed the pleasure of emotional cane into a psychological wheelchair. Something that began as temporary aid became permanent dependence. The more cruel irony is that the more sophisticated our pain avoidance methods become, the more painful our existence becomes. It is as if life is a corderless river that needs to flow. When we damage its waters, they do not disappear, only accumulate until pressure that eventually breaks all the barriers we build. The repressed pain does not disappear. It fermented, transforms, returns multiplied and disguised as anxiety, depression, existential empty. Our Neanderthal ancestors lived in daily intimacy with all the spectra of human experience. The pain of hunger taught them on gratitude for food. The fear of predators kept them alert and united as a group. Sadness by losses helped them value those who remained alive. They had no option to selectively anesthetize parts of existence. They had to develop wisdom to navigate the full intensity of life. What we call feel too much is actually the beginning of a healing process that our culture no longer knows how to recognize. When someone breaks emotionally, when he can no longer support the performance of normality, when he finally admits that he is not well, this is not the end of the journey, it is the beginning. Authentic pain is like a fever that indicates that the immune system is working. It is a sign that something in us is still alive enough to react to the toxicity of the emotional environment we create. Ancestral wisdom knew that pain accepts transmutes into understanding. Each non-medicated emotional injury prematurely carries the seeds of a specific wisdom. Loving rejection teaches about self-value. The loss teaches about impermanence. Betrayal teaches about discernment. Solitude teaches about inner company. But we can only extract these teachings when we allow pain to fulfill its natural cycle, when we resist the temptation to abort it at the first sign of discomfort. Modern society has created a kind of emotional apartheid, where feelings considered negative are segregated, pushed into the ghettos of consciousness, treated as second-class citizens of human experience. We celebrate the joy, tolerate irritation, but we ban mourning, melancholy, existential anguish. We do not realize that this emotional segregation makes us incomplete humans, people who can only dwell half the spectrum of existence. The return to the inner cave is not regression, it is revolution. In a society that constantly pushes us out of ourselves, which teaches us to seek validation, entertainment, meaning from external sources, returning inward represents the bravest act that a human being can accomplish. This cave is not a place of isolation, but encountering its own essence, with what remains untouched by the cultural contamination of modernity. Our Neanderthal ancestors sat before the fire and let the hypnotic flames open portals for deep understandings. Exterior fire was a reflection of inner fire, that ability to transform gross matter into energy, to convert painful experiences into luminous wisdom. They knew that pain was not enemy to be defeated, but oracle to consult it. Each injury carried a specific message about the limits of existence, on the invisible laws that govern human experience. The path of conscious feeling requires that we develop a new relationship with our own emotional intensity. Instead of automatically reacting to feelings, we have learned to receive them as visitors who bring important information. Anger is no longer a personal problem and reveals itself as an indicator of violated boundaries. The sadness to be individual weakness and proves to be a portal for understanding impermanence. Fear abandons defect status and assumes its role as a refined navigation system for territories unknown to experience. This transformation requires particular courage because it goes against all the emotional education we receive. We have been trained to judge our feelings, to classify them as positive or negative, to try to control or eliminate those who bother us. The conscious feeling proposes something radical. to accept our integral emotional landscape as sacred territory, as a unique expression of our individual humanity within collective humanity. The silence that heals is different from the silence that paralyzes. Paralyzing silence is a forced absence of noise. It is mutism imposed by shame or fear. The cure silence is active presence. It is a conscious choice of creating internal space for ancestral wisdom to emerge. In this silence, we are not running away from the world. We are creating conditions to hear it more clearly, to perceive nuances that the constant noise of modern civilization prevents us from capturing. Archetypal reconstruction happens when we stop trying to be corrected versions of ourselves and begin to find out who we really are under the social conditioning layers. It is a process that requires patience of emotional archaeologists, delicacy of those who excavate treated treasures under decades of forced adaptations. Each layer removed reveals authentic aspects of personality that have been buried by the demands of social functionality. Our cave ancestors had no psychologists, but they had something more powerful: direct connection with the natural cycles of existence. They knew that just as winter prepares the earth for spring, periods of emotional pain prepare the soul for expansions of consciousness that would be impossible without this process of internal softening. They respected the time of wounds, honored mourning, celebrated healing when it came naturally. The call to the courage to live whole is not an invitation to emotional masochism or unnecessary dramatization of suffering. It is an invitation to radical honesty with oneself, the acceptance that a full life includes the whole spectrum of human experience. It is a choice to prefer an authentic and complex existence to an anesthetized and simplified life. When we finally choose to feel consciously, something extraordinary happens. We find that we are much more resilient than we imagined, much more able to navigate the emotional complexity than they taught us to believe. Sensitivity is no longer a personal burden and reveals itself as an instrument of refined navigation in a world that has lost its ability to feel its own wounded collective soul. Here, each video is a call to the soul, and if you heard, it's because you're ready to remember who you are.